Welcome to another episode of Connected Conversations with me, Carly, your host with Cohesia Connect. And I'm so delighted to have with us today Jon and Andrea from The 4 Habits. Jon and Andrea, welcome to Connecting Conversations. How are you today?
Amazing. We're so looking forward to this conversation, and thanks for having us here.
Absolutely. Echo that. Looking forward to the conversation.
I think I am probably the most excited about this conversation. For those that don't know, Jon and Andrea have spearheaded an incredible initiative as experts in the industry for about 20 years, working with corporate, focusing on relationships. And they have authored The 4 Habits together. They are building great things with The 4 Habits, which I'm sure we'll mention a little bit further on in the conversation. But really, today is such an opportunity, and I think it's gold that perhaps unless you really come close enough, you're going to see it shine. And this conversation, I imagine, is going to unravel a lot for so many people. You have an extensive kind of long time relationship with the idea of relationships. How did you guys get into making this what you do?
Now there's a story for you. I think Jon will
We're
start
so ready
because
for it.
there's a line in there that's Jon's favorite line, so I'll let you start.
I'd say divine intervention, really, because we didn't set out to go into work in relationships.
True.
What we actually we met at business school. So back right at the beginning, met at business school, and our line, we always like this line. Andrea came to the UK to get her master's, and she ended up getting her Mister as well.
There you go. Now you know that's why
I love that. I love that.
So met at business school, figured, hey, we can run a business. How hard can it be? At that point in time, Andrew was working in consulting, management consulting, myself in banking. We had a fabulous year out in Tokyo, living and working out there. And we figured we'd really gelled as a couple. We could now set up a business together. How hard could it be? Well,
famous last words.
It took us all about 3 months to discover just how hard it could be.
Mm.
And again, I've shared this many a time. For me, it was very easy to see why we had challenges in running the business together, because I knew very clearly how to do everything right, and Andrew just had some funny ideas.
Well, now everybody can see why we really had some challenges.
You can see why we had challenges.
So in those early days, we really grated against each other, and what we didn't realize was it was our strengths which were unrecognized, unappreciated, and out of balance. Each of us trying to change the other. And it was a very frightening time because we'd come from a very easygoing relationship. We'd known each other for 3 years, engaged for a year, married for a couple of years before we started the business. Very easygoing relationship, which suddenly became frustrated, critical. Problems at work followed us home and vice versa. So it was a desperate place. I know sadly divorce is the route that some couples have to go. We wanted to try everything before looking at that option. And thankfully...
Well, I think it's probably fair to say most couples, certainly that we've come across, try at least everything that they can put their hands on. For us, we were blessed and fortunate because we came across some material. In fact, it was your sister that came across some material and said, guys, have a look at this. This has been really speaking to them. That's herself and her husband. And what we found it did for us, or certainly for me, was help me understand different approaches, because I could see the world through my lens or my focus or my blinkers, whatever it is. I could see the world one way, and Andrea had a very different way of seeing the world. Certainly how we approach things. I mean, simple examples, we'd work on client proposals together, and she'd do something and give it to me to review, and I'd say, well, what on earth is this? Because it just wasn't the way I was expecting it to be presented.
And it wasn't that polite either.
Yeah, that was a nice version. But we just had very, very different approaches. And my frustration was, why can't she see things the way I can see them?
Yeah.
Because I've got the right way to see things, right? That's how I thought in my simple little head. My arrogant head, I guess you would say it. I thought I had the right way of doing things. And it wasn't until I started to recognize strengths in Andrea that actually I could see I didn't have. Just for example, back then on the people side of things, Andrea was awesome. We started building a team around us. She was just awesome at getting on with the staff, working with them, getting them on side, etc. For me, I came from a very harsh investment banking culture on the trading floor, where it was hire or fire. If people didn't deliver, they were out the door. You replace them when you move on. It wasn't a nurturing culture. And for me, that's just how I did things. It's what I saw. It's what I grew up in. And like, okay, well, if that's how it's done, that's how it's done. didn't work for us. So as I started to recognize that actually Andrew had strengths where I didn't have strengths, and I started recognizing maybe I've got some relative weaknesses in that space. And it was that, for us at least, that was a key part of just recognizing we had different strengths. And actually, okay, if you can play to your strengths, I play to my strengths, and let's cut each other slack in the areas where we have relative weaknesses. Now we started to work together a little bit better, and things
it really
along smoother.
Yeah, it really helped us to understand what it meant to be team, and to create the space for each other to shine in their strengths, and to use our strengths to cover for each other's blind spots or weaknesses, because everybody has them as the flip side. And then we realized that, gosh, if with all that we had in terms of experience and education, because just a quick aside, we both did postgraduate degrees in management studies. My specialty was in organization behavior and culture. So we had the content in terms of education. We'd both done personality profiles and team profiles, Myers-Briggs, Belbin, all of that stuff. And still here we were struggling to work together, even though we also had a strong relationship outside before. So the question we asked ourselves is, if this was such a struggle for us, and this insight helped us, who else could we help unblock what was going on in their relationships, both in the workplace and at home? And that became the passion. That became the mission that or the passion that we lived out alongside a day job in other careers. Jon was in investment banking and I was in management consulting. And then 7 years ago, we got to the point of saying, when you turn 50, what do you want your life to count for? And this passion for helping people, equipping people to do relationships well, to master the skills for reducing relational tension and really building strong relationships on purpose. That was the enduring passion. So that's the thing that we've decided to dedicate whatever time we have left to getting that message out there.
And I was going to say, fair to say, probably for the last 30 years, evenings and weekends on the side, not every evening or weekend, but quite often people would come to us, people would find out what we did. We were passionate about it and we wouldn't hesitate to share some of the skills and ideas. So people would say, if they knew of anybody going through relationship challenge, they'd say, go and talk to Jon and Andrea. We'd happily welcome them in, and ended up sometimes, talking through the night to people, to share principles with them. But as Andrea said, 7 years ago, we said, look, let's make this a full-time mission. This is something, the world needs this. There is so much relationship breakdown out there, in the home, in the workplace. It's everywhere. The implications are huge. The need is there, as we quickly discovered. The want wasn't quite so there. People need the skills, but they don't realize that they can actually learn some of these principles. And also there's a bit of a hesitation. Where do I go? How do I do this?
Or to even talk about relationships sometimes. And quite often it's too little too late when you get to the point that things are so desperate, you need help. So much hurt and damage has happened to the relationship that people just lose the will to even want to make it work anymore. And that's what we're trying to get ahead of, and help people understand that there's some basics, there's some fundamentals that if we just understood what's going on a bit better, understood the principles, we could turn up better, have better conversations, and get better outcomes instead of spiraling in the wrong direction.
I just want to go back to something so key that you said there, if that's okay. And I think you mentioned this just now, Jon. There is a definite need for what you guys do. We're so grateful for the work that you do, that you've taken actually the mantle and you're running with it. And your dedication and devotion to it is, I feel, unmatched in certainly what I've encountered so far. So grateful for that. You've acknowledged that there is a need. You've also acknowledged that people are not necessarily wanting to engage. Why are we missing that gap? What is the disconnect there? Because like you say, relationships are pretty much our currency for everything that we will experience. That's in the workplace, that's with families, that's with our marriages or our significant partners, our romantic, our friendships. This is crucial and central to everything. Why have we missed the need for intentionality about building up good strength and equipping ourselves well to engage with the thing that is going to impact every single area of our life?
Yeah, I think there are a number of reasons, and we've been lying to ourselves about things. Is a kind of summary line.
When you say we, you don't mean us, you mean
I mean
society.
just us. Well, maybe at one point,
It's not personal.
John always gets at me for saying we. But one of the things that's out there in social media, in the press, in romance novels, is that all you need to do is fall in love, and all you need to do is, feel like you're compatible with this person, talking about, romantic relationships, and then everything else will be fine. We talk about, Disney sells us the story. I love Disney, by the way, but the story we buy is they got married and lived happily ever after, when actually the work starts after you get married. So part of it is a naivety in the way we turn up to romantic relationships. There are lots of other things, but another big factor, I think, is in the workplace. We teach people how to be good team leaders, or how to turn up well and put on this professional facade to be the nice person at work, but not become the nice person necessarily from the inside, because we're still, up until COVID, that is, treating people like they're split personalities. The personal is very separate from the professional. So leadership development wasn't really necessarily touching the core of who the person was and how they turn up in relationships and how they behave in general. It's just teaching you how to be a good boss or whatever in this particular context. Those are the two reasons that come to mind.
I think we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of the rule. And people look around themselves, they see relationship breakdown out there. It's kind of become the norm. It always has been the norm. But back in the day, people would grin and bear it. One partner would be unhappy, but divorce really wasn't an option. So they would just kind of, live a miserable life. Maybe live, in separate parts of the home or different beds or whatever it was, talking about domestic relationships. But they just grinned and bore it, I guess. In today's world, it's just, people look around, divorce, separation is just such a common thing that people figure, okay, well, 50-50,
if it's not working,
it's not working, we just move on. But the implications are huge in terms of stress, mental health, emotional health on them, on the kids. It's even worse. I mean, the stats are all out there. Maybe if we have time, go into that as well. But it's the business case, if you will, suggests that this is not a good place to be. Now, we're not saying to people, if you're in that kind of environment, just stick it out or just sit it out, because if the stress builds, it comes out one way or another. So that's not great. But what most people don't seem to realize is there are things you can do to learn how to do things better. And that's really where we come in, where we say to people, recognize that, who was it? Einstein said, look, you can't fix a problem with the same level of thinking that got you there.
Yeah.
You got to be able to zoom out, look down on the problem and go, now I can see what's going on. Now I can fix it. If you're in the trenches, you can hear the bombs going off around you, but you have no idea how to fix it.
And
you've got to be able to lift yourself out of the trenches, get that information. And what we say is, actually, there are things that we're all doing that are not really helping. So you need to get better at self-analysis and actually recognize what you're doing that isn't working so well, self-awareness. How are you coming across that isn't landing so well? And stop doing some of those things or change your behaviors. Because it's those things that you're doing unintentionally. We're not trying to wreck our relationships, but there are things that we're doing that aren't landing well that we need to discover and stop, and things that we could be doing instead to improve the relationship, identify those things and do them. Sadly, just one more point. The challenge most of us have is when things go wrong in relationships, whether it's home relationships or work relationships, it's always all the people we see. Nine times out of 10, it's pointing fingers. It's the other person, you bad person, you're dysfunctional, you're a narcissist, you're a bad person, whatever it is. It's never me. Very, very few people. Actually, what they need to do is get to the point of recognizing, it takes two to tango. Even if it's 10%, I need to recognize that whatever my contribution is, what is that? And stop doing that. And usually we find it's more than 10%. I'm being kind here, but at least start there. What are the things that you're doing that aren't landing so well? Sometimes you might do something or say something that causes the other person to respond badly. You then don't like their response, and very quickly you're in a spiral out of control, and the whole thing blows up.
And
actually, there's something that you might have done that caused that person to respond badly. So what was that? If you could stop doing that, I'm not excusing their bad response, but actually, if you could stop that trigger, then actually they might not respond so badly, and actually next time you have a better chance of getting through it. So identify what you're doing that's not working so well and stop doing that is a great way to start.
I was going to say that's just the point, because with relationships, we don't kind of acknowledge up front that every relationship will face challenges. That's something that we're not being just clear and upfront about, knowing that there will always be hurdles, there'll always be challenges.
Yeah.
The problem is we live in our own heads, and we think everybody lives in our own heads and can read our minds and know what's important to us. And as Jon was saying, we're not that aware of how what we're doing impacts the other person. So we're so busy with our own thoughts and our right way of doing things. When you have two people thinking that way, you're inevitably going to have moments of clashes. And because we're not expecting these clashes enough, even though we know they don't live in our heads, we behave as if they do, end up with the clashes, and then we're not equipped ahead of time to navigate those challenges. So our mission, our mantra is to have relationship education become a natural part of personal and professional development, so that you can preempt some of these challenges, get over those hurdles easier, and get better outcomes at work, at home, and in life.
I mean, what you're saying just makes so much sense. And yet it feels like, I think my question is going to lean towards, is this something that everybody can acquire, this mindset that you guys have become so fluent in? And for me, this makes sense and I want to engage with it. But I imagine, is there a generational kind of, should I say, reception that might be more inclined to want to embrace, actually, I need to make this part of my everyday? Or is this a cultural mindset that perhaps is more inclined to the Western way of thinking? Like, where does this fit? And are there deterrents for us being able to really embrace what you guys are talking about? Because I think, as you said, everybody needs it. We are all in relationships. We all have to start navigating a sense of self-awareness as to how what I do is going to impact 50% of every interaction. But I'm not sure that everybody is ready, and for various reasons. So I just wanted to pose that to you guys. And in your experience, is this a culture that we have to acquire? Is it easier to kind of acquire it living in the Western world, or are there other things at play potentially that we need to engage with?
I think the answer to all of the above is yes, but I think we're on a trend. So one of the things that COVID did, for all its ills and all the trauma that it created, it helped us merge personal and professional to be seen as one person, which means conversations that weren't allowed, personal conversations that weren't allowed in the professional space, we can have those now. And it also showed the impact of relationships at home, if they're working well, how that becomes a support network to turn up well at work. And if they're working badly, how that impacts how you turn up at work and not being able to be fully present and perform well, and so on. So COVID helped to start bringing this conversation more alive. I think generationally, younger people are more open to having these conversations. They have, being digital natives and so on. All of their life is all over social media. So they're used to living a whole life and talking about their personal life at work and vice versa. That's the generational side of things. What do you think about cultures? I think, like, if you think of our experience in Japan, I think some cultures are more open to putting the relationship side of things, putting more emphasis on the relationship side of things. We talk about high context and low context cultures. A lot of the West is very much low context culture, where we can do business just on a transactional basis and not really need to get to know the person or get to trust the person before we do the business. But most of the world, the rest of the world, is a high context culture where the relationship and the trust is a bigger deal. So I think those cultures will have a head start in this, certainly professionally. Whether or not they merge personal and professional, I think COVID and the next generation does that better. What do you think?
I think it's a great question. I think that the challenges are out there regardless. Culture will cause a challenge for some. Generation will cause a challenge for some.
Yeah.
There are lots and lots of barriers. as Andrea said, the answer is yes. For each of those,
Yeah.
they need to find a way to overcome those cultures, those generational pulls, whatever it is. The fundamentally, none of these issues apply at a group level. It all comes down to at an individual level. What is your knowledge? What is your understanding? What's your self-awareness? What's your other awareness like?
And what's your openness?
And what's your
to
openness?
doing
So yeah,
yes,
there will be some cultural, generational norms, whatever it is that kind of pulls you one way or the other. But you're going to have to find a way as an individual to just recognize that if you allow yourself to be led by whatever it is that's
your default
guiding your values or your principles or what have you, you may find yourself in a difficult place very soon. I think all cultures are supportive of trying to fix a relationship if it's on the rocks. Whether again as it's a domestic relationship, but when we're just speaking domestic relationships for now, I've yet to find a culture who says, "Oh, you're having challenges, good thing, separate or what have you." No, everybody's trying to find a way to fix that. The question is, how do you do that? What are the things that you can do to help you understand each other better? How can you learn to be? There was somebody we were talking with recently who was saying actually there is maybe this is a culture point. Great, coming back to that question. Great point here, which is for some there's a culture of compromise. Compromise is a good thing. Certainly in a workplace setting, compromise is always seen as it's raised up as the golden child. Yes, compromise is a good thing to do. You want something, I want something. Well, let's settle in the middle and let's compromise. That kind of works some of the time, but in relationship land, really that doesn't make for a successful long-term relationship, because actually if I want this and if I want A and you want B, and we end up compromising, really what that means is we end up with C and I don't get A, you don't get B, and nobody really wins. Really what you have to do in relationship land, and it was Harry Benson, wasn't it, who we were talking with, his rearticulation of that is actually for success in relationships. Somebody needs to sacrifice sometimes. So I want A, you want B. Okay, I'll go with B this time. Maybe next time we go with A or what have you. And it's not done necessarily in a give one, take one, but it's actually it's an opportunity to say, yes, I want this, but actually you have that. And actually, as we spoke to him it was one of the podcasts that we did, actually, the realization came up that actually by me saying to you, I want A, you want B, I'll go with B this time around. Sometimes the response from the person who's gotten the B is so good that actually they want to come back and thank you for allowing them to have it, and you benefit as well. And the whole thing can get to a much better place. So actually sacrifice is much better than compromise in in a long-term successful relationship. And maybe there culturally, if the culture is telling you compromise, maybe there could be some challenges there. Actually, so counterculturally, we're saying sacrifice is a much better thing to do there for the long-term success of the relationship.
It's a generosity of spirit, isn't it? Wanting to bless, wanting to give, saying, I'm here and I'm here for you. I've got your back and we can figure this out. And that works. That mindset works both in the professional context and in the personal context as well. But to your point about culture and the impact of culture, because of the way the world is going, we're becoming, far more global, far more diverse. Building our cultural awareness and our ability to engage with different cultures, to understand the assumptions we're bringing to the conversation might not necessarily be shared with other people we're engaging with. That's become a huge skill that we all need to develop and get better and better at, because the world is only going to become more diverse.
Yeah. And your answer to so much of this, which this has just been literal gold dust falling left, right, and center, guys. We'll be here all night if I had my way. But your answer to that has been your work called The 4 Habits. Do you want to share a little bit about really kind of what these 4 habits are and how you've actually made something adaptable in a way that actually this works across the board, which is incredible. And I'd love to hear more about that from yourselves.
So I can give an overview and then Jon can share the 4 habits. Because to your point and to what we were discussing before, what the 4 habits are, they're really 4 ways to become intentional around about your behavior. And it's 4 ways that address the 4 key aspects of difference that cause real relational tension. So when we talk about the habits, as you know, Jon will tell you them in a moment, one key aspect of relational tension is really misunderstanding personalities and work styles. That's what we encountered, even though we knew each other so well. Another key habit or challenge is how we turn up in tension or under stressful situations that end up in conflict. The third one is what we just said, you know, the assumptions that we carry, the biases and beliefs that we impose on other people in our expectations of them. And the fourth one is just the way that we communicate and miss each other emotionally because we don't know how to make people feel valued and appreciated. So the 4 habits are the 4 key behaviors we need to make habits in order to get better at addressing the 4 vital or the 4 most common causes of real relational tension. So the 4 habits are
well, I'm going to back up for even just a little bit longer, actually, because it's important, I think, for people to understand why the 4 habits make a difference. Then they actually sit and listen to the habits, the power of them. Because we started out the conversation by saying, or certainly earlier in the conversation, we spoke about how we all do things unintentionally that are landing badly, and actually then the other person responds badly, and you can find yourself quickly in a bad place. So what you need to do is firstly identify what some of the things are that you're doing that aren't working so well. And what the habits do is certainly habits number 1 and 2 help you identify those things that are landing badly and stop doing them. And habits 3 and 4 help you do more positive things at the same time. We have this concept that we talk about of the emotional bank account. It's not something that we made ourselves, but something that's been around there for a while. But the emotional bank account is a very powerful concept for people to get their arms around, because all it is a very simple concept, but it says when you meet somebody for the first time, you set up an emotional bank account with them. From that moment on, every interaction is either a deposit or a withdrawal. If it's a deposit, it's a cha-ching into the account. The balance grows. If it's a withdrawal, it's sucking life out of the account and draining things. If your balance is in negative territory, your relationship will not be in a great place. Simple as that.
Yeah.
So you really need to be working to keep that balance in positive territory if you want to be able to enjoy a happy, healthy, successful relationship. When you're in overdraft territory, like your financial bank account, when you're in the red, everything can become a problem. Well, the same thing happens in relationship land. So actually habits 1 and 2 that we talk about help you on purpose identify the withdrawals that you've been making and stop doing those. And habits 3 and 4 help you recognize what it is that you can be doing that makes deposits into the emotional bank account. When you do those together, you have the best chance of getting that balance into positive territory, relationship success. So then habits 1 and 2, what are they? So habit 1 is be curious, not critical. And that is in the face of difference, when somebody does something or says something or acts or reacts in a way that you wouldn't do, most of us get critical. We're like, what on earth do you do that for? Why was that? We come across critical.
My world is right. Why are you so weird?
I had the right way of doing things. Why on earth did you do what you did, you weirdo? It's kind of what we may not say that, but that's what we're thinking. Actually, a much more helpful approach is to say, well, that was interesting. Why did you do that? When I looked at the world, I saw the world like this. I would have done this, but you did something different. Help me understand why you did that. I don't think you're crazy. It's not what I would have done, but help me understand why you did that. If you can adopt that approach, and there are lots and lots of practical ways that we help people adopt that mindset. But at the core of it, it's developing that ability to get curious rather than critical in the face of difference, different approaches, different responses. So habit number 1 is be curious, not critical. Why don't you do number 2?
Do number 2. Okay, so habit number 2, be careful, not crushing, is about getting better at managing conflict situations and learning to treat each other well so that you use the conflict, which is inevitable, it's going to happen. You use the conflict to build your understanding and strengthen the relationship rather than resort to behaviors that damage and shred relationships apart.
And I was going to say, and why that's so important is, especially in a conflict situation, most of us get selfish. We do what's right.
Stay selfish.
We stay selfish. Yeah, we do the selfish thing. When the pressure is on, it's like, hey, this works for me, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And if it works for you, it probably doesn't work for the other person. So it's, okay, if it works for me, I come away feeling good. The other person left feeling bad. If you keep doing that every time and time again, it's not great for the relationship. So in the face of challenge, what you want to do is get more careful than crushing.
And that's hard because with all the habits, absolutely, and we call them habits on purpose, it really is about unlearning behaviors that have become our habits and our defaults, becoming really intentional about behaviors that lead to more successful relationships and making those habits. And that's what the 4 habits are about.
And it's easy to talk about the habits here. And I think most people, when we say them, get the habits.
Intellectually,
it makes sense. Oh yeah, I've got to be more curious than critical. I've got to be more careful than crushing. I get it. Now, how do you develop that muscle? How do you turn up in the gym and start lifting those 50-kilogram weights or whatever it is, and not just the baby 5 ones? Because it takes a while to get there. You've been doing something for however old you are for so many years. You've always done it that way. Now you need to retrain the brain to do things differently. And we talk a lot about that in the book that we have, in the courses that we have. It's helping people, baby steps, get to the point where their habits are now different and helpful for the relationship. And so those habits 1 and 2, as I say, are about identifying the bad things that you've been doing, the naughty behaviors, whatever it is, the negative
things that make withdrawals. Because even if you unintentionally do it, you do something with the best will in the world, you can notice when it lands badly. It's still a withdrawal, and we can learn how to make deposits on purpose. So habit 3,
ask, don't assume, is it's a big one, because this really now speaks to our cultural values. It really, at the heart of it, is about understanding what's important to me and what's important to you. Really sort of core values. And because most of us seem to think that because something's important to me, it's going to be important to you as well. And actually, if it's not important to me, then it's probably not important to you either. When nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
And so really habit 3 is all about getting to, we say, ask, don't assume. It's about getting to the heart of what's important for me, what's important for you. Let's have those conversations, very courageous conversations, difficult conversations to have sometimes, because these are core values and drivers we're talking about, whether it's, in a domestic setting, it could be around how you handle money, how you parent your children, how,
you manage the in-laws.
Exactly. It could be all sorts of things. In a work setting, it's around, even simple things that have come to light in recent times in the hybrid world. Do people work from home? Do they come back to the office? If they're at home, are they slacking, or are they actually more productive at home? These are values and things that are on our mind. There are lots of assumptions that we have and conversations that you need to have to thrash out even some of those, what's important to me, what's important to you. How do we get the right result from this? So habit number 3, as I say, is a big one. But once you identify what's important, then you need to go to work to put boundaries around certain things, healthy boundaries around things, to make sure that they are in place, and people can then achieve what they're looking to achieve. Because absent that, there's going to be friction.
And also, it's about developing the skills to have these really open, honest conversations about things that can make us feel very vulnerable, and we'd rather sweep them under the carpet. So that one really goes deep. And then habit 4, connect before you correct, is just recognizing that it's like we're hardwired to tell people off. It's so easy to tell people, give constructive feedback, let them know where they need to improve, and often forget to just communicate value and appreciation, to let people know that they matter. But there's a saying that we just love, which says people go where they feel welcomed, but stay where they feel valued. And that's as true at work as it is in the home context. And so being intentional about communicating value and appreciation really builds that sense of engagement and belonging and I matter. And against that background, you can have any tough conversation, because people have your back and you matter to them.
And
So
I was going to say, just to labor that point for one moment longer, if you don't leave people feeling valued, they're unlikely to stick around. And people need to really hear that. You have to communicate value in a way that actually leaves the other person feeling valued. Sadly, what most of us tend to do is speak our own language. We say, okay, well, I think this is going to make you feel valued. Off you go. But
or
actually,
you should know that you're valued.
You should know that you're valued because I told you, or I've been doing all these things for you.
Yeah.
But actually, if we don't leave the other person feeling valued, work relationships, home relationships, 100% applies. If somebody else turns up that starts making that other person feel valued, more valued than you're making them feel, they're vulnerable to that. Somebody else could come along and make them another job offer, and they'll look, oh, that's interesting. I feel like
I don't matter here, so it doesn't.
Or in a domestic relationship, somebody now starts making them feel really special, and you haven't been doing that. Sad to say it, you've left that person vulnerable. It's your job to make each other in a domestic relationship, make each other feel like you're number one. If you can do that, you sort of close the door to vulnerability, you close the door to those outside influences. So it's a really, really important thing to do to show that value. So that is a key way of making deposits into their emotional bank account that then keeps them in the relationship happy. You're not in there and you're sort of long faces and all forlorn. That's what keeps the relationships healthy, happy, successful, and alive. So those 4 habits together are really what gives you your best chance of keeping that emotional bank account in positive territory and keeping the relationship alive, happy, successful, and long lasting.
Yeah, it's giving people clarity and accountability around the behaviors that make a difference in relationships. Because from our research over the years, every successful relationship had all 4 habits. Every failing relationship was missing one or more. So if you want to build great relationships around you on purpose, you can. You just need to put the time in to learn the behaviors and make them become your habits with the 4 habits.
I think that is such a perfect place to kind of pause and end, although we will be here forever if I had my way. I'm an avid subscriber of the 4 habits. If you've not done so already, I would highly encourage you to follow the work of Jon and Andrea. You will not be disappointed. This is really life tools. Jon and Andrea, before we let you go, firstly, huge thank you for sharing so much of your work with us. I know it's just literally the tip of the iceberg, a glimmer into the insight of the in-depth and such important work that you do. One word of encouragement for people that probably have come across this conversation and have felt, I don't know what to do. This is something new. What would you say as a piece of encouragement to them today?
There's a line that Jon likes to use, which is get more understanding and be more understanding. It really is about getting to know yourself more and becoming more aware of the people around you. So it's about being intentional with developing the skills to do relationships well. None of us is born with it. All of us need it. So don't do nothing, if that's the right way to say it. Do something on purpose about building your level of relational intelligence. And we'll share, on our website, the4habits.com with the number 4. I'm guessing it'll be in the show notes. We have lots of resources, free resources, more premium resources. You get to choose something so that you can start where you are and build your skills to learn to do relationships well.
Yeah, I'd say, if I could add to that, I'd just say, actually, getting more understanding is what allows you to be more understanding of the other person, of the situation, and that's what helps the relationship. Get your information from us, get it out there from anybody else, but do something. Don't sit there with the same level of thinking that you currently have, because you're going to stay in the trenches if you do that. You've got to get out of those trenches to be able to look down from above, to see the map, to see the lie of the land, if you want to be able to move forward. So do that. You can absolutely learn things. We've touched, as you rightly said, it's the tip of the iceberg. There's the book that we have out there, just called The 4 Habits of All Successful Relationships. It's out there on Amazon, all good booksellers, as they say. We have online courses. In fact, if you go to the4habits.com/resource hub, it's a brand new page that we've just put together, but all the resources are there in one place, and it'll kind of give you a roadmap of the different things you can do, whether you are looking to improve your relationships as a couple, as an individual, or sort of workplace relationships. We've kind of broken it down like that. but do something. Don't sit there. The problem ain't going to go away on its own.
Nope.
You want to do something on purpose to build your own muscle, so that when the challenges come, and challenges will come in relationships, if you're not already facing them, you can believe me, you can take it as read. I'll tell you, they're coming down the road at some point. Life will change, something will shift, those challenges will come. You want to be ready for them, to get over those hurdles as they start to manifest. If you want a chance to get to the finish line, I'll use a racing analogy, or an athletic analogy. But you want to be able to be equipped to get over those challenges, to get to the finish line, build the muscle, start your training, start your practice now, and you can absolutely get there.
Amazing advice.
The final thing that I will add is it's never too late. It's never too late to start working on the skills. It's never too late to start working on the relationships that matter to you. Just start.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you so much for sharing such a wealth of awesomeness. I don't really have another way to describe it, not as articulate and as stunning in any shape or form, but huge thank you for what you've shared with us. We are so looking forward to watching the increase and expansion of the 4 habits and its influence and impact everywhere. Thank you so much for being with Cohesia Connect today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Carla. Great pleasure.
Yeah.